Hey YouTube, what's up? So in my last video, I made a video, the last one, which was called, oh wait, what was it called? It was something like, wait, Nidra Yoga is astral projection. And I want to talk about that a little more. Yeah, so I talked about this already in the members area, but like there's some interesting connections between Nidra Yoga and astral projection. Essentially, they're very similar. They're very similar. Nidra Yoga and projection are very similar practices, essentially, right? Yeah, so I've been doing a Nidra Yoga inspired meditation for a long time, for over 5 years, probably. Nidra Yoga style meditation. And as a result of the Nidra Yoga style meditation, I often move into what appears as the astral, well, the astral plane. And I think this is one of the things is like the astral plane gets a lot of press, like astral projection is like, oh wow, that's amazing. But there are other levels of projection too. So the astral projection is just one level of projection. It is an unbelievable thing though. And there's a bunch of ways of doing astral projection, and some of them are, I think the difference is that like astral projection, as it's commonly understood, is that you leave your body, right? You leave your body and you can travel around the universe. That's cool. But you can enter the astral plane without leaving your body. And I think I mentioned that in the last video, right? You can move into the astral plane without leaving your body and still have what appears to be a very deep experience, including but not limited to the evocation of spirits and deities and demons or whatever craziness you think you want to do. However, what I mentioned in my last video is I was mentioning that that while I've been doing this for a long time, I haven't really formally, intentionally, well, I have, I mean, but not really, not reliably astral projected, like in the classic sense of leaving the body. No, I have done it a couple of times. So I did it 6 months ago in a quest to confront some traumatic events. And the way I did it is interesting. There's a whole bunch of ways you can initiate astral projection. The common ones, which are most well known. Oh yeah, I'm at this. I can't really do it well yet, but it seems like it's pretty easy. I've done it a couple times this week, like the classic astral projection. Yeah, I guess what I should say before I get into like details and stuff, the point of this video is I did do the classic astral projection this week. The first time I did it, it was interesting because the technique's not that much different than what I usually use for chakra work and this kind of stuff, but it was a projection technique. And it was just earth shattering. It was unbelievable. And it's changed my whole view of reality, basically. And yeah. So what I was going to say is there are ways of doing this. And it's easy to deceive yourself also. But the thing is because like I work in the astral a lot, like, so Matthew is like moving into the astral plane, and I can do that in 2 minutes. That's easy, right? But like the actual projecting your consciousness out of your body is more difficult than moving into the astral plane. There's some difference with this. Yeah. So, and this is one of the things. So the reason I got into this was I saw somebody offering a course about this, but it was quite expensive. But I bought a different course because I thought, I just got this feeling that why am I not all over this, So I was watching the course, and it was just, it's not really that different than what I do, to be honest with you. But of course, the course actually relates Nidra yoga to astral projection. And so the funny thing is I do Nidra yoga already. So these techniques are like really known to me. Like, so I do all this stuff already. So the one difference is, so in Nidra yoga, they call it, you rotate your consciousness around your body. So you think about your different parts of your body. Then you think about your fingers, then your hands, then your arms, right? And then you'll have a visualization of something like Buddha or something like that, right? And a lot of these a lot of the ways Nidra yoga is done is based on a technique called Nyasa from Tantra, from Sri Vidya Tantra. And in Nyasa, they touch the body and they sort of install deities into the body. And so Nidra yoga is kind of based on that. And it's funny because I've spoken about Nidra yoga being based on that for a long time. And that was sort of something I just sort of guessed at. It just seemed so similar. I thought they're using Nyasa. But what's interesting in the course I just took, the guy who did the course actually found a reference. Swami Satyananda, who developed Nidra yoga, actually based Nidra yoga on Nyasa. So I've actually got an official authentication of what I've been saying for 5 years, you know. So that was quite cool. Anyway, so there's a whole bunch of techniques which people normally do to the body. So one of the techniques is like you pretend you're pulling a rope and that takes the body out, or you roll out of your body, which is the Robert Monroe technique. And there's a whole bunch of different ways, but this book had this video was a video, it wasn't a book. This video I was watching had a bunch of techniques which really rung a bell with me. So one of the things that I do a lot of is I do a lot of what they call what do they call it? Pendulation. That's a phrase which is taken from somatic healing therapy. So what they do in somatic healing therapy, and also with lots of other things, is you might take a part of your body. For example, say your finger's sore, you'll think about the sore finger, then you'll think about a finger that's not sore. Then you'll think about the sore finger and not sore, not sore, and you pendulate like a pendulum, going between these two different sort of states of awareness, right? And that has some sort of effect. Now, I do that a lot. For example, in the chakras, you might choose Svadhisthana and Manipura and pendulate between them. Now, depending on the speed and quality of the pendulation, you might call it path work, right? So in Kabbalah, there's a whole bunch of ideas about path work, and that's where you think about one, you meditate on one of the separath of the Kabbalah, then you think about the other one, and then you pendulate between those, and then I'm going to use another P word here, then you meditate on the relationship between those two energies, right? So you sort of meditate, and so I do that kind of stuff a lot. Like I'll meditate on the tension and magnetism and energy between various chakras, and you can discover relationships. And what happens is if you've got incredibly good concentration, what happens is you pierce into the astral plane, right? So the way you get into the astral plane usually, and this is different because astral projection is different than this actually, but like the way I usually pierce into the astral plane is just from laser focus. So like if you get complete concentration, consciousness, you may have heard like in Buddhism and various other paths, they talk about consciousness like a diamond, like it's a diamond. And diamonds have many properties. One of the qualities it's got is of cutting anything, right? It's like the sharpest surface you can have. So consciousness is like a diamond because it cuts through anything. Anything, I tell you. It's unbelievably powerful. And so you can achieve this with concentration. And so typically if you're meditating, you'll pierce into the astral plane, and you can go further. You can go into the mental plane, you can go into lots of different planes, right? Now the astral plane is often seems like the most interesting because it's very visual, right? And it's more than just visual though. Yeah, dude. So I've been doing this for a long time, and like part of the reason I've been doing this is because it was happening anyway. So I was moving into these states of consciousness anyway. So I figured I might as well get good at it, so at least I could like control it a little bit, right? So that's what I did, and so yeah, and so now I'm good at it. But I'm about to say nothing prepared me for astral projection, but in a way, it's very similar. Like the vibe is very, very similar to what I'm already doing. It's actually the same. It's almost the same state of consciousness, but I think the implications of leaving the body are huge, and it changes the context. Yeah, so the context of astral projection is different than piercing into the astral plane through meditation, and that context has pretty just earth-shattering implications. I'm almost I'm almost of the opinion that people shouldn't astral project. Almost. I'm still going to do it for a while, but it's like it's dangerous. It's not, and it's not dangerous. Like it doesn't feel like it didn't feel evil or anything like that. You know, it just you break into the astral. When you leave the body, it just feels like oh, it's just it's I think what if it just you just realize that this is a really 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 serious operation. It's very serious. You're dealing with levels of consciousness which humans probably shouldn't have access to. Um, or it maybe it's been designed that humans don't have access to this. Well, I mean, it hasn't been designed that way because humans do have access to it, so you can access it. But it's really profound. And so yeah, so I'm using this technique of pendulation. Pendulation is moving between two concepts. So when I was watching this video about the technique, one of their techniques for astral projection was a pendulating technique, which is something I actually think in those terms quite regularly. So when I saw this technique, I'm like, oh, that kind of corresponds with what I'm already doing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. Hey, Frankie, I'm going to try out this technique because it seems like the same thing. So I did it, and it was just jaw dropping. So the way you do this, and so here's the difference: is like if you're breaking the astral plane through meditation, it's like laser focus, and that breaks into the astral plane, right? And then once you're in the astral plane, then you can go into insight meditation. So you use laser focus to break into it. Then you move into insight meditation, and that allows you to sort of expand your awareness inside the plane. Now, there's a bunch of ways of doing this. One way you might do this is it depends, like for example, if you're focused on a mantra, that might give you a way of focusing your mind. And then once you break in, you might start thinking about other ideas. You are not thinking about, you might start meditating on a sort of bigger concept. So like the way you style your meditation changes your level of awareness, basically, right? It changes the amplitude and breadth of your awareness, right? Yeah, so typically what I'll do is I'll meditate like on Mani Padme Hum, and I'm using it in my chakras, right? I'm going through the chakras, and I can feel energy building. You know, a lot of times I don't even feel, well, the energy's always there. It's like it doesn't even go away. You know, it's always there. And then once I achieve like sort of concentration, then I break through, and then I might change into a different. Then I might change into a different mantra or start. Well, a lot of times what I'll do, like if I'm evoking Krishna, for example, I'll start humming the Krishna mantra, and then I'll start sort of visualizing like Krishna with his flute, and I'll start thinking about it in terms of divinity, and what does divinity mean? And if you allow your mind to expand, like what is divinity? Like imagine, Frankie, like imagine if divinity existed, right? I mean, what would it actually mean? And so what you do is you allow your mind to expand out to what divinity might mean. And the crazy thing that happens is that is the calling card of divinity. It's like when you allow your mind to contemplate the possibility. And so what I'm saying, so you see, I sort of start with a focus, and then I start contemplating the possibility. It's a different kind of focus. It's almost like asking a question, right? So that's kind of like what insight meditation is. And then boom, and that's often how an evocation occurs. And you know, a lot of times evocation will begin with you can feel it. It's all you can just like the atmosphere changes, and it just things just feel. It's almost like, oh fuck! It's just like this is amazing. and just like it's like the quality of, I want to say the quality of consciousness changes, but it's like consciousness is such a, like not many people understand what I'm meaning when I say that. So let's just say it's almost like the quality of the air changes, the quality of the room changes, and it's almost like you can, like it feels like all of a sudden you're inside the Taj Mahal or something, right? And it's just covered with these beautiful Indian tapestries and carvings, and it just everything changes. And this is just sort of entering into the abode of Krishna, right? And then, dude, it's just everything. It's amazing. So that kind of thing's really common. I mean, I can do that like any day, pretty much, you know. And I'm not going to say it's common because that sort of disrespects the experience, dude. It's a mind-blowing experience, but because you're in the body, you still feel kind of like yourself, right? So even though these things are happening, you're still sort of like, you're oriented from your center and you're sort of working from this place. By contrast, astral projection was just that really was an eye-opener. um, this video is called Sheaths of the Etheric. And the idea of the sheaths of the etheric is really profound, and it affects reality and it affects everything. It affects everything, everything. And the technique, the pendulation technique. Now, the way astral projection usually works is it like I'm using this sort of quasi nidra yoga technique. So I start off just doing the nidra yoga technique. I just go around the body and I go through the body and sort of I do my standard meditation, but I do it really quickly, like in about 5 or 10 minutes. So I go through all the body points and then I go through the chakras and energize all my chakras. Boom. Then I do the same thing again, but this time what I do is I think about all the parts of the body and I relax. So I go into a process of relaxing and relaxing all the muscles. Some people have trouble sort of visualizing or actuating this process. So a good way of doing this is you like, if you've tightened all your muscles, tighten them and then relax them, right? And then you can sort of feel the difference. So it's kind of like a pendulation effect. It's a pendulation technique. So you tighten it physically because you know how to do that. Then you release it, and then you just watch how that happened. Then you'll do the same thing with each part of your body. You'll tighten it and release it. Now, once you get used to this, you don't have to tighten it. You can just use your mind, and it will just happen, right? And it's different, but I mean, you can just relax without the tightening, and you just get everything really relaxed. Okay. Then the next process is you move into focusing. You go into sort of more concentrated meditation technique. So the one the guy in this video recommends is on the breath. And so a good technique for meditating in the breath, because like it's a harder, the breath, while it's the most recommended meditation technique, I've always found it quite hard to meditate on the breath. But a good way of doing it is, part of the reason it's difficult is because the breath is such an abstract concept. So a good way of doing it is meditate on the freshness of the air, which is still meditating on the breath. But what you do is you're sort of, it's a more refined concept of what the breath is. So what you're actually doing is you're trying to focus on how fresh the air is, right? So something, that will change from season to season. It can change from breath to breath, right? It'll change if you got like a pillow on your head or whatever, or if you've had incense going. So the quality of the air changes. So that's a good way of like doing a meditation on the breath. And so the idea is you focus on the breath and you keep focusing on the breath, and you have to remain absolutely motionless, completely and utterly motionless. And so the reason you're staying completely utterly motionless is because the body and the mind aren't that tightly connected. So what happens is if you keep your mind focused on the breath and you don't move your body, not an inch, what happens is the body thinks you're sort of, that your mind shut off to go to sleep, and your body starts going into sleep paralysis. Now, what happens is you've got to do this when you're not that tired, because I've done it a bunch of times and I fall asleep, So if you go to the gym in the morning, like I've been doing, you just fall asleep all the time. So it's better to do it like when you wake up in the morning or in the afternoon, I think. So this is the problem, is when you're focusing on the breath and you're motionless, it's easy to fall asleep that way, but you've got to be vigilant. And so you can say things, you can repeat little things in your mind, like body asleep, mind awake, body asleep, mind awake. And this allows you. And so what's really fun, a couple of times I've got into the state, like this happened like 2 mornings ago. I was like, dude, it was unbelievable. And I was still conscious, and my cat started scratching the door. I'm like, and I'm like trying to keep it, and I'm like, I've lost it, you know. So I tried to move, but my body was in sleep paralysis. So it was like a weird, like couple of seconds, like as I was breaking out of it. And so this happens automatically. Now, sometimes it won't happen. Like I drink a lot of caffeine. So if you've had a lot of caffeine, it's difficult to get into the state because like a lot of times I'll be getting to the state, but I can feel my heart like struggling from all the caffeine I've had to that day, you know, duh. Or of course, if you're tired. So you've sort of got to be in a sort of perfect sort of state. And that's quite easy to manage, just as like normal life management stuff, right? Also, if you don't eat heavy meals, like no heavy meat or anything like that, keep it light for a day, maybe water fast for a day if you're going to do this kind of stuff, because it would just all that the loosening or cleaning your system will really make this a lot easier. I think what happens is once you get used to it, it becomes a lot easier. But like you'll know how to get to because here's the thing: is getting into it. Like, dude, like I go into the astral plane all the time, but nothing prepared me for this. Like, it was that surprising. I'm like blown away by fucking what happened. It was unfucking believable. Um, so nothing will prepare you for it. So you need to give yourself all the advantages that you need. Now you hear a lot of people talking about astral projection on the internet, and they're acting like it's a lot of fun. And dude, I just think they're fucking idiots, dude. I mean, listen, I think it can be fun, but this is serious, 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 serious shit. It's really serious. So the pendulation technique. So yeah, anyway, so once you're in the sleep paralysis, right? And you need to, oh, what happens too is once you're in, I'm about to explain this, Frankie, is, once you're in sleep paralysis, there's a couple of ways this can happen. And actually, the first time it happened, so once you're in sleep paralysis, a lot of times what happens is the dream mind turns on, and you start getting a flow of sort of dream imagery, and you can sort of, and that's like it's very powerful. It starts flowing, and you can sort of watch it turning on, and so that's like almost the best time to do it, like right then. But you can do it before that state too. If you're feeling really loose. If you're not stressed out, you can just pop out. But yeah. Anyway, so some people like get into this state and then they roll out or whatever, and they imagine the body. Frank is saying what was surprised me about it. I'll tell you what surprised me about it. And the funny thing is like this has happened to me before, but I think I think it depends how you do it. Maybe it's like if you do it like I've gone out my body a bunch of times, like I don't know, back in my old house a couple of times I did it, like but it was always from sort of hypnagogic state, like where you're sort of in that state. And it wasn't I mean I think I was just different this time. So here's what happens is what you do is you imagine an etheric body, right? So you imagine an etheric body. Some people imagine a copy of everybody up on the ceiling. You can imagine it standing beside you. It's sort of weird because it almost feels like a ghost or something. So it's like weird imagining something beside you, right? Or on top of you. There's a sort of weird vibe. And I can't remember how I was thinking about it. I think I was imagining that I was sitting like in a lotus position at the end of the bed, something like that. And the pendulation technique is what you do is you become aware of your body. So it's almost like meditation. It's almost just like regular meditation. You become aware of the sense of touch, right? Become aware of the sense of touch. And then what you do is you imagine that you're in the etheric body and you're becoming aware of the sense of touch in the etheric body, right? Okay, then you jump back to physical. Then you go back to etheric. Now, here's the trick here is that everybody says that imagination, if you want to manifest something, imagine it. Imagine it. It'll come true, right? It's imagination is the root to all truth or whatever, right? Maybe. But the etheric body, it's a sheath. It's a sheath of, what's this video called? Sheaths of the etheric. Sheath. It's like a sheath of etheric material. Etheric material is an imaginative construct. Now, if you're thinking about the imagination, you're thinking of just an image in your mind, right? It's just an image. It's just something you imagined. It's not real. It's just an imagination. Here, the big surprise is that I've got an imaginary image in my head of a body. But what happens is as you move your awareness back and forth, something happens and your awareness stays in the etheric body. And you suddenly realize that your awareness is not tied to the body. It's not, it's like, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to experience it. It's what happens is you give life to the ether. The imagination becomes enlivened by you. Your awareness is what gives stuff life. And this is a bit of a non-dual moment. It's like non-duality in a way. It's like it's, and the quality of the ether, because dude, it's the imagination. It's so light and like, but your awareness is exactly the same. Your awareness is the same. But what the fuck? So this is what I'm saying. The difference is we're moving into the astral plane when you're in your body. It's like, what the fuck? But you still sort of feel like yourself. When you do this, dude, it's clear. It's clear that there's a massive disconnect here. And I, like I've come out of the body before, but I've never had this realization. And also, oh yeah, and this also is the same vibe. It has the same vibe as evocation. And so I've said this a couple of times on the community this week, is that astral projection is the evocation of the self, right? So it's almost as if you're evoking Krishna, but you're evoking yourself. And like it just prompts a lot of questions. So what the fuck is evocation, right? Is evocation imagining? It's using an imaginative construct and calling in the awareness of Krishna into the imaginative construct. Is that what it is? But what it means is the imagination is something way more serious than anybody's got any idea about. And of course, this has happened a whole bunch of times since then. And now this idea of the sheaths of the etheric, it's like I'm seeing it everywhere now. It's like, and here's the thing: is how subtle is your imagination? How subtle is your imagination? And how often do you invoke your imagination? I was at the supermarket and I noticed that I was fantasizing about eating something, and and that's an imaginative structure, and my awareness moved into it. I'm like, holy shit, there it is. That's the same process. But that's something you do a million times a day, unconsciously. And so this is like one of the arguments people make for doing magic. It's like, well, you're already doing magic, you just don't realize it. So you might as well learn. You might as well learn what it is, and then you at least you'll know what the process is and yeah, that. However, this technology is more advanced than anybody can understand. It's more advanced than I can understand. And if you think about like circuit boards in the computer, I mean, how were the circuit boards designed, right? Or something more simple like the electrical diagram for your house. How was that designed? Well, somebody sat down with a pen and paper, and they've thought carefully about circuits and where to place them. And so in their mind, they've sort of drawn out this sort of diagram of how to connect all these things. And it's taken them some time, and they've drawn out. Now, probably if you go back the next day and you say, maybe they built an electrical system for a mansion or something, and you go back to them, you say, hey, listen, what was the structure you created on the second floor, third bedroom? They're not going to remember because it's too detailed, right? The conscious mind doesn't remember it, right? And so they won't remember it. So the thing is, it's like, what's actually happening in your mind is way more complex than that, right? And there's this process of that idea about creating a circuit diagram, like that is a sort of application. It's using a specific case. It's using a specific case application of consciousness and applying it to a drawing. But consciousness will work on thousands of levels. It will work with drawings. It will work with music. It will work with math. It will work with cooking. It will work in anything. It will work with sex, right? So what happens is in all these different art forms and sciences and thought structures, there's consciousness has a sort of meta language of movement and structure. And the best way to understand that structure, or the most generalized way of understanding it, is using the elements. That at least describes the dynamics. It doesn't describe the forms and shapes it takes, but it describes like some of the dynamics, structures that happen. And yeah, but the point is, it's a really deep. It's beyond human understanding. Which by itself has mega implications, all right? I mean, like if it's beyond human understanding, then what the hell is it, right? What the hell is it? So when you move your awareness into an etheric object, which can be anything. Now, this is an interesting side note here, is Franz Bardon's book, Initiation into Hermetics. Initiation into Hermetics basically describes a lot of these practices. There's a part in Initiation into Hermetics where Franz Bardon describes moving your awareness into objects and different parts of your body. So there's different ways of moving your awareness. So for example, if I think about my hand, that's kind of like moving my awareness into my hand. So you might think that's what it is. That's a really simple way of thinking about it, but that's kind of true. You are kind of doing that, right? If you have like energy awareness or Kundalini, you can move Kundalini into your hand. That's a different sense of awareness. If you're in a hypnagogic state, you can move your awareness into the hand, and it's a different quality of awareness, even still. If you astral project, that's good. What it is, it's almost like what happens is you're giving life to the etheric object. You're literally giving it life. So if you're imagining something and hoping for manifestation, it's a very low energy conscious structure. But if you move your awareness into the etheric object, it's literally giving it life, literally. Now, there is a part of this. It depends like how much you focus on this. So for example, I was doing like a magical operation earlier this year where I'd created a certain thing, and I was imagining it, and it took on some life, but I hadn't. What happens sometimes is if you can really get good focus, then you'll break into a sort of like I'm saying, like you could with concentration, you can break into sort of astral realm. And so you can visualize this thing, right? And it was funny at the time because I kept seeing like real world sort of parallels of it, like bizarrely. But if you can move your consciousness into it, it's like it just changes. It changes everything. So in Franz Bardon books, he talks about this. He talks a lot about. There's a whole practice of like watching your astral hands, like and moving your astral hands to do things, right? For example, right now my arms are by my side. So if I move my astral arms up in front of me to pray, I can do that right now, right? I'm imagining my hands are like this in front of me, right? But they're actually down here. So I'm imagining my hands are up praying. But right now, that is just an etheric sheath, right? It's an etheric sheath. It's not actually actuated because I haven't moved my awareness into it. When you move your awareness into it, everything changes. And I'm going to say, well, I say this about a lot of stuff, but this is one of the secrets of real magic. So, for example, when you move your conscious. When you realize that etheric objects are sheaths waiting to be filled with life, which is awareness. And if you think about all the things you unintentionally invoke in your mind, in your imagination, think about all the negative shit you put your awareness into. You've got to be really careful about what you think about, or what you got to be very careful about what you put your awareness into, right? You got to be really careful about that, because you're not aware that your awareness is life for the etheric. So if you put your awareness into your astral arms, here's a good example. You go and do a Reiki class, right? So you do Reiki and they say, yeah, well, what you do is you draw a little icon and you imagine energy going into somebody, right? Yeah, great. But dude, if you can move your awareness into the icon, if you can use your arms, but it's your astral arms, you're using your real arms, but you actually can move your awareness into the astral projection of your hands. This is how you awaken the people, right? It's awakening by awareness. It's really hardcore. And so like, I mean, in a way, it's kind of cliche. People say this, like be careful what you dream about too much. It might come true. But it's literally an energy transmission, like your awareness. And so, and once you've done this a few times, and you can see the etheric being lit up by your awareness, and this is like during a formal astral projection, but then you're just walking around the world, and like everything in the world is essentially, as you will know, like the real world in the astral plane, it looks very similar, right? So it's almost like the real world is actually being energized by something, or vice versa. I mean, what is the relationship there? Is all that awareness coming from me? Is that what's giving this life? Or am I just one node and the whole thing's being lit up by divine awareness, right? And so this is where the interesting part is like, well, if it's divine awareness, that means astral projection is playing with the language of the divine. That's why it's dangerous, because it's like you're playing in realms of consciousness which are very, nobody believes they exist, let alone knows what the outcomes or implications of this are. So if you were to try any of these techniques out, you have to be hell of a careful with them. And so my whole thing really is that, yeah, I mean, there's a whole way of doing this. Obviously, like the Bardonian path is you astral project out to meet the elements, the elemental spirits, and this kind of stuff. And you astral project out to the planets, and the planets and elements, the planetary spirits and elements will teach you more about the techniques and more about the conscious language of magic and this kind of stuff, right? Or if you're in the astral plane, meditation is like 100 times more powerful, right? So if you're in the astral plane, you can meditate and you just see all your chakras lighting up, and it's crazy. But again, it's got a real different vibe. Like the classic astral projection is actually starting from, what happens with classic astral projection, you're actually taking advantage of the body's state. So the body's already moving towards that state, and all you're doing is sort of, I mean, maybe it's more powerful because you do it that way. So if you're astral projecting, your body's moving into like dream state, and you're sort of jumping on the bus. You're jumping on the dream state bus as it moves into consciousness. And so what you're doing is you're taking advantage of a power which is greater than your sort of standard mental power. So if you're doing it with Kundalini, it's more of a sort of forceful process. You're using your concentration and you're thinking and you're pushing it. And whereas I think in a way, astral projection is almost easier. And like somebody was saying, you don't need to be Kundalini awakened to astral project. You just need to know this technique, right? So it's really fascinating. I mean, in a way, I think everybody should do it, because it's like I went downtown an hour ago, and I was downtown, and I bought a sandwich, Subway, bought a Subway sandwich, and I'm sitting there eating a sandwich, and I'm looking at all these people, and none of them probably realize what's actually happening, right? That it's like it's all just it's awareness projecting onto etheric structures with so much energy that they're being actualized in physical reality. And so there's great ignorance about this, but it's like it seems to be pretty important, especially in the current sort of atmosphere of the world, where like everything sort of all sort of classic structures of social structures seem to be disintegrating. Um, it's not even they're not being disintegrating; they're being destroyed by certain forces, right? And so this gives some perspective. And the other thing about this too is there's actually the whole thing with the sheaths is like the interaction between the etheric sheaths and energy is very interesting. So, for example, well, I'm trying to think of a good example, which isn't too personal, but like, say, for example, if you've ever had like, this is a bad example. Here's a good example. If you've ever been like dating somebody and you're really into them, then they do something and it's like you just lose interest, right? And you're like, No, in the common parlance, we'd say, well, you just lost interest, but that's actually something's happening energetically, right? So there's like a sheath of awareness, like the imagination sheath has something changed. That changed form. Its energy signature changed. It became polarized. And this is like this is interesting, because I mean this can be what is the locus of awareness? What is the locus of awareness of the mind? One of the viewers here a few years ago, we were chatting a lot, and he was telling me a story about his girl. He met that. This is a funny story. I'll repeat the story. I haven't told this story in a while, but it's funny. This guy, he's funny. I haven't spoken to him in ages. He's so fucking funny, this guy. But he had an experience. He met this girl. He'd broken up with his girlfriend, and he said, "Fuck it." This was years ago, before the internet, maybe just around the internet. And he put a personal ad out, and he thought, he's like, "Fuck, I'm gonna try and find somebody really different." So he's like, "Yeah, I'm into like meditation and like the occult or some of this." So he meets this girl, and she's a Reiki master, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, no problems." Anyway, he's like trying to get her into bed, and she's like, "Sure, let's go to bed." So they go to bed, and she fucking blasts him with Reiki. And he said to me, he's like, I was crying. He's like weeping. He's like, "I love you." He's like all this stuff, right? And she's like, yeah, I know, whatever. Just like fuck me or whatever. And he was laughing about it afterwards. Like he's like, well, dude, what the fuck? So he dated this girl for a while, and one of the things that happened was, what was it? His dad was remarried, and his stepmother like didn't like him. Like she was like really sarcastic and said, "You're a loser. You're not going anywhere." He was working for he was working for like the train company, right? As a conductor. And they were like, she was dissing him the whole time. Anyway, one time he came over to his house with the girlfriend. And when he was in there, the stepmother criticized him in front of the girl. And the girl said something really sharp to her. And 3 days later, because the stepmother also worked like as an executive in the train company, I think it was. She was like an accountant or something like this. And so 3 days later, her car broke down, or no, her car was totaled. And then she, apparently, I think she took all the money, like to the bank or something. It was all stolen. She got fired, and then his father dumped her, divorced her, like all in the space of like a week. And he was saying to me, he's like, dude, because she was like a black Reiki master. Funny story. And who knows? Maybe it was just bad luck. But he was like, dude, it wasn't bad luck. I mean, he's like, the girl has powers. I'm like, fair enough, And Reiki is a very powerful thing. Anyway, in terms of the sheaths of the etheric, is like how does that work? Now, Reiki's actually got a simplified language using symbols, right? Using symbols in the chakras. So you can probably use like inverted symbols and if you've got the awareness and the energy, you could focus it on specific chakras. That's actually probably where the locus of the focus of attention would be, right? Or you could put the focus on the aura structure. So there's all these different imaginary structures which you could occupy with your awareness, or which you could manipulate this stuff. But I mean, what I'm saying is this is that's really dangerous work. The thing is like the thing is that the quality of consciousness, when I was talking to Daniel Ingram a couple of weeks ago about his book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, I was talking to him about how that I'd skipped over the first few chapters of his book, because I got into all the hardcore jhana meditation stuff and wanted to get into that. And then later on, I went back and read the other ones, which were about ethics and morality, which doesn't seem all that sexy, but they're the most important chapters. And then I was having dinner last night with my ex-girlfriend, and she was born when she was a child. She was astral projecting spontaneously all the time. She couldn't stop it, and so it took her a lot. She had to learn how to not astral project, but as a result of it, she lives an incredibly ethical life generally. And so she like when we met, she was saying to me, like, she tries to live her life by the Vedas, right? And she lives her life by the ethical rules of the Vedas, kind of a thing. Doesn't seem like it's all that like, oh yeah, whatever. Like in my own life, I've had stages in my life where I like took chances with everything, took shortcuts. Maybe not completely ethical, not really unethical, but just like, yeah, I mean, like whatever, like, not thinking too much about it, allowing things to happen without sort of taking personal responsibility. I was reading a meme about who was it? Who is the Nazi propaganda minister? Goebbels, Hermann Goebbels, and he was talking about how the state has the right. The state has the right to manipulate public discourse to create the outcomes that they want. And then also this week, somebody else. Where did I read this? There was some other source was talking about Himmler. Oh, I know what it was about Himmler, because Himmler had notes on a famous philosopher. Who was the philosopher he was following? Oh, I'm reading this book by Julius Evola. Julius Evola was this genius intellect from around the 1940s, and he was accused of being a Nazi and a fascist, but he was really a traditionalist intellectual who had complete access into magic. and he's written some amazing books. He's got a couple of books on yoga and Buddhism and awakening. So he's really, really switched on. So I read those books years ago, but my brother read something recently recommended to me, which is called it's basically about the destruction of the West. I don't have my phone here. It's about the destruction of the Western world. What's it called? It's such a good book. Julius Evola, Western. Let me see. I'll probably come up now. Yeah, here it is. It's called Revolt. It's called Revolt Against the Modern World. Revolt, and I'm just getting into it, but it's like a stunning fucking book. It's unbelievable book. His knowledge of the esoteric and magical and symbolic and archetypal integration into reality is astounding. I sometimes think of Jason Georgiani as like a modern day Evola, like is that level of intellect, shattering intellect. But one of the interesting things was that Himmler had a dossier on Evola because he was such an influential thinker. But as I was looking at this, they were Himmler and some of his comrades or some of his henchmen were having a back and forth about how to manipulate dialogues and how to do certain things and they were saying, well, we won't allow him. They're like, he doesn't seem like he'll be that useful for National Socialism, so we will quietly make sure he has no success in Germany, and then when he goes to Austria, we'll sort of make it a bust. And so there's all this sort of secretive workings. Seems really bad to do that kind of stuff, but of course, if you actually watch the flow of your own mind, you might find yourself with that level of consciousness in a much lower level of thing, much lower level of thing. Maybe you might manipulate other truths, right? And sometimes like white lies, but it's a manipulation of truth, right? It's manipulation of conscious structures. And that's an energy manipulation. And so what happens is like, it's almost like if you do one little minute, how they say that if you tell one lie, you have to tell 1,000 lies because all of a sudden you got to like support the lie. That structure of lies creates like a skeleton of energy, right? That skeleton and that follows you around. That creates an astral structure of lies. Now, the thing is we tend to think of the imagination as this bullshit. Who cares? Who cares about the imagination, right? Yeah, child, I don't care. But it's not. These are sheaths of consciousness, which have been filled with awareness, right? And so you're leaving these towers of deception, like edifices, cities and villages of deception, like little buildings designed by the deceptive mind. Now, if you're building structures like that, what kind of beings live in structures like that? Or what kind of beings are attracted to structures of deception? Right? What kind of beings are attracted to truth? No, we accept this is all imaginary. It's all imaginary. But we already know the imagination is something else when we think about it. These are fundamental structures of consciousness, right? They're fundamental structures of consciousness. And so they have, the problem is the amplitude and resolution of human awareness at the physical level isn't enough to understand what you're actually playing with. It's just imagination. It's something else. You're playing with something actually very profound. And ethics and morality you don't want to be building structures like that. You don't want to be building structures like this. You want to be building something else. But we're doing this all day long, right? So on a momentary, moment-to-moment basis, we're thinking through these ideas. Even now as I'm speaking, ideas come into my mind. Am I going to mention that? No, I won't. Will I mention this? No. And so there's the decision structure There's a decision structure which gets populated by imagery. If I move in one branch, it might get built in. Hey, Aitor. I don't remember that, but you certainly can do that kind of stuff. Yep. It's warm here, man. Anyway, I think it's yeah. So I think astral projecting could be valuable as a way of understand. Actually, this is interesting too, because I was talking to my ex last night, and she was saying to me, like, she's like, when she was trying to stop astral projecting because she couldn't stop it happening every night, and she was taking like sedatives and stuff to try and just help stop astral projecting. And her whole focus in her life has been trying to ground herself and ground and ground. And she got into Tantra. Like I got into Tantra because I had this like activated imaginative body, highly activated imagination. And so I tried learning Tantra to help me understand the flow. And that was one way of understanding it. But she got into like sort of Kashmir Shaivism Tantra, which is based on the physical body and awareness of the physical and pushing. And the idea that the physical world, you're like, and like Igor Kufayev says this too, is like, you don't have to meditate on the chakras, meditate on your skin. It's divine. Your skin's a divine structure, right? Yeah, Matt. I mean, animal spirit might be a good way to learn to control astral projection. I mean, maybe it depends how you're going to use it, I guess. I think my general thing is, my general basis of working with stuff is from the viewpoint of consciousness. So if I was going to use an animal spirit, I'd be thinking of the animal spirit in terms of consciousness itself. Although it's certainly a lot of shamans use animal spirits, I guess, right? But I think, yeah, I think also like a lot of times when people do those kind of like shamanic journeys, like the shamanic journeying tends to be imagination, right? And it tends to be more about like imagining the process. So for some people who've got activated imaginations or who can push their consciousness into that, then it will be very real. But I think for a lot of people, it doesn't get to that level. You know, it'll be a purely imaginative thing, and it might feel good, and they might think, "Hey, that's astral projection or it's shamanism," but it's not. It's not really. I mean, it is, but not really. It's because it's not activated like energetically. In a way, like Kundalini is a bit like this too. Because, for example, like quite a few people feel energy and call themselves energy workers, right? And they think that the energy is Kundalini. Like, yeah, I'm moving energy. That's Kundalini. It's not. That's not Kundalini. It's prana, right? Prana. I'm not sure if this is exactly true, but in my experience, prana creates the pathways on which Kundalini moves. Kundalini is pure consciousness. It's not energy. It's beyond energy. It's something else, right? Now, if you've got Kundalini activation, you'll feel energy, right? You'll feel energy. But when you have the awakening, it's divine consciousness, whatever that means. I don't know if it means it's your higher self or it's actually God, or I mean, it's something else. So yeah, I guess that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm really tired all of a sudden for some reason. The sheaths of awareness, sheaths of the etheric. Try and become aware. Oh yeah, you know, I think that kind of stuff, man. I mean, what you're talking about there is very like Franz Bardon kind of thing. So one of the things Franz Bardon talks about is, see, what you're actually talking about is interesting from that perspective, because what Franz Bardon's talking about is he's talking about you project your consciousness into different animals, right? So like in your case with the owl, you would become the owl, right? if you're going to astral project, you'd astral project into the owl itself. So you'd imagine now, this is the interesting thing. I mean, you can astral project into a double of your body, or you can astral project into like a different fucking animal. It's crazy, dude. It's completely and utterly crazy. I mean, the doors that it opens up are totally mind shattering. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to stop. I'm really tired. I gotta go to bed. All of a sudden, like my eyes are closing. Don't know what happened. Didn't sleep much last night. Anyway, take care, all you guys. Yeah. I've got a couple of interviews coming up here. I got contacted by the Swedenborg Foundation, and I'm going to be interviewing somebody from the Swedenborg Foundation in the beginning of March, and then Giorgiani, I'm going to interview him again coming up here soon about his book Closer Encounters, and he's got another book I'm reading called World State of Emergency, which sort of describes what's going on. Actually, it's an older book, but it sort of describes the coming trauma, and yeah, interesting. And I read another book recently too called What Technology Wants. That is a good book. It's an easy book to read. That it's kind of like a compliment to Giorgiani's work, but with a different slate on it, a different view. But it's an easy read, worth reading that book. The guy used to be an editor at Wired magazine, so he's got a sort of popular style. But basically, he talks about the technium, which is basically the spiritual aspect of technology taking over the world, right? So it's worth the read. Anyway, yeah. Peace out, you guys. Thanks for saying hello. Ciao.